What's up guys, the Strong Boys 19 here. This is going to be my long return back to the segment of Classic Albums Revisited, where it's a segment that I review one of my favourite albums of all time, and I'm going to be pretty much anticipated to talk about an album that is really a massive addition into a huge direction and a dramatic approach in different sounds and music. And I'm going to be reviewing the album from one of the UK's most important bands, King Crimson, entitled Discipline. Discipline is the 8th studio album by King Crimson. This was released on the 22nd of September 1981 by British label EG Records and American label Warner Brothers. This is the first album in the trilogy where Robert Fripp and company made 2 other albums after this in the genre of new wave and progressive pop era. This is the follow-up to their last album, Red, which featured John Wetton and also Bill Bruford. This is the first in the lineup of this era of Adrian Belew on vocals and guitar, Robert Fripp on electric guitar and Frippertronics, Tony Levin on bass guitar and Chapman stick and backing vocals, and Bill Bruford on drums and percussion. The album was produced by the band as well as Rhett Davies. This is the first after the 7-year hiatus, and Robert Fripp and Bill Bruford remained with the King Crimson name after the previous lineup. The album released singles of Mate Kudase / Elephant Talk in September and Dela Hujinji in September. Upon its release, it did get widespread acclaim and it went to number 41 on the UK albums chart while receiving mixed to positive reviews. This album has been documented as one of the best King Crimson albums and as well as one of the greatest albums of the 1980s. Discipline for me is an album where it absolutely still resonates. It still sounds as phenomenal and massively fresh. It's one of the best albums by any band with a totally different approach than what they would usually do for a discography. And King Crimson, well, Robert Fripp, I should really say, that he has totally changed the style of King Crimson on so many places on earlier albums involving records like Islands and Lark's Tongues in Aspic, different albums that they blend in something very experimental, percussive. Some of the riffs, like on Red to Lark's Tongues in Aspic, can be very gnarly and pretty brutal, as well as that type of sound with previous lineup changes as well. But I find that Discipline's identity and the acclaim is still as big and mostly relevant into what type of fruition and attention span an album like Discipline can achieve. This is an album that I was playing over and over and over again because I was really curious, because I wanted to know and understand why many people say that Discipline is one of the band's masterpieces in their discography. And the more I was diving into this album, there was just that admiration. It's a huge, admirable album because it's one of those records that you would never ever think about, but to believe and actually discovering that a band like King Crimson can make something totally changeable and different to what they have done previously, but still make a banger of an album. For almost 40 minutes into this runtime on this album, and with 7 tracks, Discipline's work and way of imagination and magical sprays of songwriting, I think Discipline really is still a massive document. As much as I do love the albums like Lark's Tongues in Aspic and others involving the debut album of In the Court of the Crimson King, I think Discipline is personally one of my top 3 favourite albums in the King Crimson discography, and it's just made me so in awe still, and even me now talking about this album in this video, that I will have to stay with these opinions, that I am going to be saying this, that this is an album that I personally will pick over In the Court of the Crimson King and even Red. As much as I do love the debut album, one of my top favourite debuts of all time, and I think that Lark's Tongues in Aspic or even Discipline could be the pick for me as my favourite King Crimson album, because there's just so much to talk about. And not only that, Discipline's instrumentation is still at a big move into the style, this time onto progressive pop, to a bit of the new wave, and something really much more art rock inspired, and with Robert Fripp really praising this type of lineup as well into the discography of this band, I can see why a lot of people say that Discipline's reputation is still a hugely big part of any band's discography, especially King Crimson's. The first track on the album, Elephant Talk, this is a hugely wild number, and the more I thought about the rhythm section on this track, it's not polyrhythmic, but it sounds like it, and these brief chord notes from Fripp and also Tony Levin, they slap, and the way Adrian Belew sings and shouts into this track, it always makes me think about David Byrne from Talking Heads, especially like on albums like Remain in Light. You know, that type of vocal performance onto like Once in a Lifetime, for example. That is exactly what I was thinking about when I think about Adrian Belew's unique way of playing. And there's another outstanding track, Frame by Frame. This is just as a chaotic and a maddening skilled performance of a piece of music. Tony Levin with the Chapman stick, he goes really ballistic. These fast-paced no playings, it's all over the place, but it's so tight. The drums from Bill Bruford were just outstanding. His skills and the way he was just so delivered in a percussive and artistic way. Bill Bruford's always one of my favourite drummers of all time. And not only he's played with bands like Yes, for example, and a bit of Genesis earlier on in his career, but this is the era, along with Lark's Tongues in Aspic to Starless and Red, that Bill Bruford, for me, is my favourite drummer for King Crimson. And this track is absolutely no explanation why that you will not like something like this when it comes to the staccato, complex arrangement of this instrumentation. Again on Belew's vocals, his voice on this, his cleans were just so wonderful. And one of my other favourites is onto the track of Thela Hunjinji, which is a huge, upbeat, kind of like a very quick, funky type of style. And the track's title is actually an anagram of the line of Heat in the Jungle, which is a reference to the crime in the city. And the term heat is actually the American slang for firearms or for the police. But musically, Thela Hunjinji, besides the joyful, positive sound of the vocals, including the percussion, this is a non-stop, mid-tempo, but stomping and an engaged type of sound. It's always engaging to me. It's one of those songs that is pretty much danceable at the same time. and even onto the two instrumentals of The Sheltering Sky, which Robert Fripp sounds so crisp on his guitar tones. It's, to me, the type of sound where it's full of enthusiasm, and Robert Fripp's always one of my favourite guitar players of all time, and his tone on this album was absolutely glorious. The way he plays, the way he sounds onto this type of guitar distortion really blends in, and there are some points where you can hear some more guitar synthesizers, and with Fripp using his own devices known as the Frippertronics, like he's done that before with Brian Eno, like on No Pussyfooting or Evening Star. But I find that The Sheltering Sky, and even on to the title track and final track of Discipline, an instrumentation piece like these two songs, they were so calm and beautiful, and as much as really versatile and passionate and delicate, I should say, this type of direction of most of the material on Discipline, I think the instrumentation and the production to the vocals, this is a unique album. It's totally unique from start to finish. Everything has been said about Discipline, that many King Crimson fans have said a lot of praise about this record, and for very good reason. And they, I think, followed this type of sound up very successfully on their next album, Beat, which is one of my favourite King Crimson albums. But obviously, for me, into the top favoritism and the trilogy of their new wave albums, Discipline is always the #1 album from the trilogy that is the best one out of the bunch. And I do love so much of Beat, and I think that Three of a Perfect Pair is very good as well. But yet alone, I think that Discipline's own charm and worth of an album is to me more of the definition into what King Crimson are all about. And it's not just about the total shift of changes on the music that the band has done, especially for Robert Fripp on earlier albums and even on the later stuff. But I do see that this is an album that, if this would have been a debut album, then it would have been a massive start. And, you know, it's like with other bands involving Pink Floyd or Can and many other unique bands. This is an album where it still sounds modern, and, you know, it's just such a huge album to talk about. And this is a record that you need to check out. I have always been demanding myself to talk about this album for quite some time. And if you haven't heard of this, do check it out. Not even if you are a new wave fan, if you're not one of the people who loves that particular genre, but this is not only just new wave. It's artistic, its expression is totally changeable, and it makes you think and wonder of a different opinion than what you would usually listen to in this particular genre. And with King Crimson being a dynamic band for so many reasons, you cannot miss this one out. Discipline is a masterpiece. It is one of their top 3 best albums, in my opinion, and let me know what you think of this album in the comments down below. As very enthusiastic and as approachable as I am with Discipline, let me know, do you think as well, if this is your favourite from the trilogy, and if this masterpiece is one of your top 5 King Crimson albums. I am very interested to know what you think of the record, and that's why this album, along with In the Court of the Crimson King, has been involved into this segment for Classic Albums Revisited. It's relevant, it is bold, it is tremendous, and it's a prolific record at that. Amazing, joyful, and just a mad album to digest. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll keep you guys posted for more videos in the near future.